some introspection, that's what we're talking about. Understanding that the Rebbe is every bit with us, connected to us, worrying about us, and the state of Golos in which we find ourselves. And if we identify ourselves as truly one with the Rebbe, each a shliach as one with the Mishaleach, then we have to do everything we can to give the Rebbe one thing less to worry about. There's a shliach who some 18 years ago was diagnosed with a debilitating and progressive stomach condition. And he went through a period of hospitalization, treatment, more hospitalization, more treatments. He simply wasn't sure if he'd be able to carry on. And he was quite young. It's not the sort of ailment that necessarily gets better. Managed at times, but never better, and usually the other way. Coincidentally, only 2 months before his diagnosis, he took out a life insurance policy, which also includes within it something called permanent disability, which means that on account of some form of permanent illness, you're no longer able to carry on in your daily job, and you can cash in. And so it added up for him. He'd have to step down from his shlichus, but he'd be able to cash in close to $1 million. The insurance company, from its part, starts to wonder, what, all of a sudden you're diagnosed 2 months after you take out the policy. They research, they determine it's all 100% okay, all fine. Then they have to determine, as is part of the process, that the ailment qualifies for the payout. So it went through the various channels, ends up on the desk of the ombudsman, which is the regulator who makes the ultimate decision. The decision was due to be given on a Tuesday late morning. The shliach went to the mikveh, did all the necessary hachanas, wrote a detailed pan to the Rebbe, asking that everything should go through with hatzlacha, faxed it through to the ayel, then sat down with an igros to read, to learn till the phone call would come. And the first letter that he opens up to over there was from a son, writing to the Rebbe about his parents who were shluchim and not in the best of health, and suggesting to the Rebbe that maybe they could slow down, relax a little bit in their avodas hakodesh. The stresses then would be alleviated somewhat, and they would then be stronger. And the Rebbe replied to the son, Ki yadua, everything in Gashmias is rooted in its source in Ruchnias. Therefore, it makes no sense to diminish in the Ruchnias on the assumption that that will somehow enhance the Gashmias, their health. Adarabba said to Rebbe, it's only by adding in their Ruchnias that they will then experience better health, enhanced health, and the more they are meisif beruchnias, when an anayfim from the chatchila river, the more the Eibishter will be meisif for them in Gashmias as well. And the shliach stared at this letter for several minutes, read it, reread it. Then he picked up the phone, called his insurance broker, hey, how are you, etc., etc. Today's your big day, Rabbi. Today's going to be the payout. Freddie, he says, you have to call off the insurance people. He says, well, are you excited? He says, what? Wait, what? He says, I'm telling you, you need to call the insurance people and forget it. He says, I don't understand. He says, no, you won't understand. I appreciate your efforts, but that's my decision. I can tell you that 18 years later, last year, when I went back to my specialist for a mandatory checkup, his words to me were precise. Yitzchak, if I didn't know you had what you had, I would never assume today that you have it. In other words, it's supposedly still there because science says it doesn't go away, but I don't see any evidence of it whatsoever. I looked at him, I said, Martin, how can that be? He says, I don't know, Rabbi. I said, what, you mean you misdiagnosed me all those years ago? He says, no, that's impossible. He says, what would you say? I said, doctor, I'm a rabbi. You know what I would say, and we left it at that. The Rebbe remains eminently with us every single step of the way. Each of us, says the Rebbe, is a shliach. Each of us shares in the mutual responsibility, so we don't weaken, we don't slacken, we don't listen to the nachash, we increase and we enhance and we aspire and we care about and bring about the gula mitzvah shlema. And I want to leave you with two final thoughts. The Rebbe once also wrote a letter to someone regarding their health with the following. Surely, said the Rebbe, you're familiar with the saying of the Rebbe Marash, as the Welt sagt, Never went through the whole explanation. If you can't crawl under the obstacle, then you leap over. But here's the lechatchila, as the Marash said, I say lechatchila river, you leap over. And the Rebbe said the same applies in your situation. Though it would be appropriate to wait until your health improves before you rejoice, maybe in this spirit of lechatchila river, lahaktim hasimcha ala tovas habrios, af shel eis eina begolu. Maybe you should first already celebrate your improved health, which hasn't yet come about, and that in itself will bring about the improvement. And the Rebbe said that's like the idea of Shlach B'Betzaynet. In other words, again, for all the meniyos v'kuchim, for all the obstacles that may present themselves, and maybe sometimes we do feel down, and sometimes we feel as if kenished, and sometimes we despair, says the Rebbe, even if right now it's not begoloi, be b'simcha, take a leap, because simcha periods together and everything will materialize accordingly. In fact, to illustrate the point, Chazal famously tell us, Asidin Yisrael sheyemru shira li'asid lavai, that in the future, Klal Yisrael will be singing shira li'asid lavai about the future. The Shalom Kodesh asks a simple question: what's with the double lashon? Asidin Yisrael sheyemru shira li'asid lavai. Just say Asidin Yisrael sheyemru shira li'asid lavai, or Asidin Yisrael sheyemru shira. Why the double lashon? And the Shalom explains something very profound and beautiful. The Gemara in Sanhedrin famously tells us that Chizkiyahu Melech was to be made Mashiach, and Sancheriv would have been Mechamas Goy Gemogay. Come the Malachim before the Eibishter, they say, Uma David Melech Yisrael. Shamar Lefanecha Shiras V'Sishbachos. David Melech came before you, and he did sing Shiras V'Sishbachos, and you didn't make him Mashiach. Chizkiyahu Shaloi Amar Lefanecha, who didn't sing Shiras V'Shishbachos, and him you're going to make Mashiach. As per the final men, the end of men, in the middle of the word Lamarbe, closed to indicate, as the Gemara explains, that a moment was closed and opportunity was lost. Here's the problem, asks the Shalom. Look in Divrei Hayomim. There's a whole chapter there beginning with the words Michtam LeChizkiyahu, a whole song that Chizkiyahu sang, celebrating over Sancheriv. What's the problem? What's the challenge that was brought before the Eibishter to say that he didn't say before Yeshiras V'Sishbachos, says the Shalom Kodesh. The moment that the Eibishter informed Chizkiyahu that he was going to give Sancheriv into his hands, the Malachim then and there sang Shira in anticipation of the victory that was yet to be delivered, with an absolute emunah and knowing that it will happen. But Chizkiyahu, sure, he sang Shiras V'Sishbachos, but only after the fact. Chizkiyahu shloi omar shira lefonecha. If he took his cue from the Malachim, and because he didn't sing lefonecha beforehand, in the belief, in the anticipation, and it says in the words of the Rebbe, lahaktim hasimcha. That was the problem. Tatum gefelt the lechatchila river. Says the Shalom, that's the meaning. In regard to our dar, our generation, Asidin Yisrael Sheyemru Shira Li'asid Lavoi. In the future, in our dar, our generation will be singing Shira Li'asid Lavoi about the Geula Mitzvah Shlema that will be coming. We will have enough emunah, enough conviction, the tenacity to sing in anticipation Lechatchila river, knowing that it will happen, that it is imminent, and that's where we need to be at. And the final point is this. As for this week's parsha, it ties in with a beautiful story. Plain simple observation. By Yomer Parei B'nei Yisrael Nevuchim Heim Baretz. Parei says to B'nei Yisrael, Nevuchim Heim Baretz. They're trapped over there. They've run away. El B'nei Yisrael. Rashi, who was Parei talking to? B'nei Yisrael were gone. So Rashi says, El B'nei Yisrael, Al B'nei Yisrael. Parei was speaking Al about the B'nei Yisrael. But the Medrash actually says, no, he was speaking El B'nei Yisrael, to the B'nei Yisrael. Who? Dasan and Aviram. They were still there. So the Rosh, the Harisha, the Rosh asks a question. How come Dasan and Aviram were still there? In fact, why didn't Dasan and Aviram die in Makas Chaysha? Were they not, after all, Rishoyim? Rosh Shalom Zakar Eyacha? Says the Rosh. Because in as much as they may have had trouble and made trouble and whatever else besides, they too still nevertheless believed that there will be a Geula. They believed in the Geula of Mitzrayim. And because they had that emunah in that Geula, notwithstanding anything else that went on, and however else they may have behaved, they too were zeicha to experience that Geula. Even if they left after a lot of the rest of Klal Yisrael. And they had their own Kriyas Yamsuf, the Rosh, it's quite a fascinating Rosh. But this is the Harisha, Ruach HaKodesh, telling us very categorically that even these people whom we might otherwise perceive as being so lowly, if they had enough emunah in the Geula, they experienced the Geula, then imagine what's necessary and what's absolutely demanded of us. And therefore, to finish with the Maisa on that note, Reb Zalman Notik, Mashpia of Torah Semes, told the story of the Bochum of his yeshiva who would go out of Mivtzoyim in Shiloi and Shomron, where they would encounter a lot of Russian immigrants. And one of the recent immigrants at the time had piped up and said, from Lubavitch. And he started to tell him how in years prior, when he was living in Russia, he would join the Hasidim of the underground in his city for occasional shiurim and occasional farbrengens. And he vividly recalled how at one such farbrengen, a lot of mashke was consumed, and they were all expressing their yearning to see the Rebbe. And they were singing, the Rebbe the Geben, Gesunden Leben, Belmazechzem, mit dem Leben, etc., etc. And he says the fervor grew, and in the middle of the farbrengen, some Hasidim got up, and they formed chairs like a choo-choo train, like children do in school. And they acted as though they were traveling then and there to the Rebbe. The others, he continued, and I was amongst them, stood up and started to tell them off. What kind of behavior is this, acting so foolishly, playing such a nonsensical game, knowing it could and would never happen? Said this Russian Yid, all those who played that foolish game received their exit visas over the next few years and did in fact manage to go to see the Rebbe. The rest of us, normal people, remained behind until the gates were finally opened only years later. You see, normal people first try to go under, and then if that doesn't work, they go over. But we're not normal, are we? We were never meant to be normal. The reality remains unqualified. The Rebbe is with us. The Nesius continues no less. The Avodah continues no less. The reality is that the Rebbe said, Ot kommt Mashiach.